Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, hope you're doing well. Okay, let's do a quick recap of week 15 of the marathon training so far. Week 15 is also the final week of the 4-week race preparation training block. So Monday was just 10 kilometers of recovery on grass. Felt pretty chill as usual. Also, my white pair Rebels finally crossed over 1,000 kilometers. It only lasted another 3 months for about 132 kilometers of running mileage before the soul just separated doing a grass run in mid-September. So I ended up just retiring it then. Probably could have glued it together, but it might be more trouble than it's worth, especially if a rock or a stick got stuck in between. The Rebels are one of my favorite shoes of all time, so it was kind of a shame to see it go, but it's all good, I guess. I might get the V4s one day. Tuesday was a 13-kilometer general aerobic run towards Riverwood and Peakhurst. I felt pretty solid there, no dramas really. Wednesday was some intervals at Saltpan Creek Reserve. It was supposed to be 6 by 1200 meters with 2 minutes jog recovery. I decided to go a tiny bit slower than I usually do during interval workouts and see if I can pace a bit better, especially since each rep alternates between like uphill and downhill. It ended up being a bit more considered than usual, but I felt much more control, so that was good. Thursday was a 24-kilometer medium long run around Saltpan Creek Reserve. I was feeling quite fresh for some reason, so the run ended up being a bit quicker than expected. Also, my shoes felt a tiny bit off afterwards. Turns out I had all these like spiky seed balls wedged in the cutouts of the midsole. Didn't really affect the performance, so it's alright I guess. Friday was a 14-kilometer general aerobic run around Riverwood and Narwee, plus some speedwork at the end, which was supposed to be 8 by 100 meter strides. I also met Amos that day, who's a fellow runner around the area. Although we didn't get to run together that much when I was still training for Gold Coast Marathon, nowadays we try to get in a solid workout together once a week or so around the area, which is great. Saturday was a recovery run at Rhodes Parkrun. It was raining a fair bit that day, but nothing too crazy. I got most of it done with Timmy. We took it mostly chill until the last 500 meters where we sort of sped up a tiny bit to the end. Overall, ran about 7.5 kilometers in total, including the cooldown. It was supposed to be 10 kilometers in total, but yeah, it's all good I guess. And then finally Sunday was supposed to be a 35-kilometer long run, but there was supposed to be a race that day that I actually signed up for some time back, and that's the Kuringgai Chase Fun Run. Thanks to Colin who invited me to give it a go. So the event is called the Special Olympics Kuringgai Chase and Barrie Easy Walk, and it's a community fun run and carnival which features 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers and 10 kilometer road races around the leafy streets of Wahroonga, starting and finishing at Claude Cameron Grove. They also proudly support Special Olympics for the Sydney Upper North Shore area, so there were many Special Olympic athletes accompanied by Knox Grammar School boys as guidance. Anyways, I signed up for the 10k, which features 2 laps, and it's a bit of a hilly course with about 150 meters of elevation gain throughout. It's also a bit far from our area. It's about 1 hour drive away or about 2 hours by public transport, and I knew that I should still be getting my long run in, so I figured why not do like a long run there, similar to what I did for the Sydney 10k race. So I sort of planned a route beforehand from Lidcombe all the way to the start line, which was going to be about 23 kilometers, although quite a bit uphill to get there. The route would start at Lidcombe Station and then cross over to Sydney Park and Rhodes, and then go up to Meadowbank and sort of follow the train line all the way to Eastwood before heading towards Marsfield and South Turramurra. And then we briefly cut through the Lane Cove National Park before heading onto the long climb that is Kissing Point Road all the way to Turramurra, and finally it was a straight north all the way to Claude Cameron Grove Park. The race starts at 9 AM, so I had to plan a long run well enough so that I could get there at about 8:30 AM or so to relax a bit beforehand. Although I planned the route fairly well on paper and gave myself what I thought was a generous 2 hours to run there, I didn't expect it to be that hilly when I actually ran it, but fortunately I still made it there at about 8:35 AM or so, which was plenty of time to collect my bib, finish my banana and gel, and even meet and chat to a few people as well. It was also a good chance for me to test out some new race shoes that I got for a discount on eBay, the Saucony Endorphin Elite. It was very solid, felt light, aggressive and quick, but that route wasn't the most forgiving on it. I definitely roughed it up quite a fair bit after that long run, since there was a lot of like slanted or like rough surfaces throughout. By the end of the long run, I did end up getting some numb toes, probably because I was wearing my slightly thicker socks, so I probably should have adjusted the lacing a bit before the race started, but I ended up forgetting to anyway. Anyways, the Kuringgai Chase 10k race starts, and I get out fairly quick. I didn't really study the course map beforehand, so I was hoping to follow someone ahead leading the way. But by 200 meters in, I was pretty much already alone at the front. Fortunately, there were plenty of marshals along the way, so I didn't get too lost throughout. The first kilometer was like a massive downhill with like about 26 meters elevation drop, which is great, with a bit more downhill through the early parts of the second kilometer, before I was suddenly met with like a massive uphill that definitely woke me up. I think it was like a 50-meter climb for like 700 meters between kilometer 1.3 and 2. Then the third kilometer was mostly flat as it was heading towards like the Golden Jubilee field. The fourth kilometer was a lap around the field, and the footpaths got a bit narrow and gradually uphill around there. Although it got a bit windy up there since it was quite high up, it was quite scenic too, since you're able to kind of overlook the Kuringgai National Park a tiny bit. I think I almost got distracted here and I was about to pull my phone for like a quick photo before I heard the marshals cheer me on, so it was back to race mode I guess. The fifth kilometer was slightly downhill and was headed all the way back to the start line for the second lap. By the second lap, I was running alongside many of the runners now, since the Barrie Easy Walk 5k event starts at 9:10 AM and the 2k dash starts like around 9:20 AM, and it was definitely getting a bit packed, but it was also really nice to see so many people on the course. At this point, I wasn't tired by any means, but I've already definitely lost focus a bit since my numb toes are kicked in again, and I was really feeling the uphills more now. I think the second time I met that massive uphill, I was down to like a slow jog near the top, and I was definitely tempted to just like walk for a bit, but I ended up pushing on and kept it quite controlled for the rest of the way. I ended up finishing in about 36:38 with a big positive split as expected in like 17:48 and 18:51. I didn't have more in the tank at the end, but given that I didn't have anyone to race alongside or someone to chase for most of the race, I'm just glad I raced it fairly sensibly without fading badly and managed to push through with the numb toes well enough. The second place finisher was Fraser, who finished very shortly behind me at about 38:20, and we had a great chat afterwards too. Turns out he's fairly local to the area, and since then he's been in a few races that I've done, and we've also done a few runs together. And then during the awards ceremony, I was given a voucher for Shoe Guru, which is like a local shoe store in St. Ives, and that was definitely much appreciated. Afterwards, Colin also offered me to try on his pair of Alphafly Frees for like a little test, and honestly it's an absolutely fast shoe. I thought the Saucony Dolphin Leap was already plenty fast, but the Alphafly Free felt like a step above. Maybe not as comfy because it does feel a bit snug, especially around the pinky toe area, but certainly a bit more propulsive I think. Overall, it was a fairly well organised and very inclusive event, featuring a hillier course than what I was expecting or prepared for, but I still really enjoyed myself out there. I also think it helped that the race conditions were fairly decent that day. Although the race was at 9 AM and it was already sunny by then, I think the temperatures were relatively cool and didn't really go above 15 degrees Celsius until a bit after the second lap I think, where the sun came out a bit more. I'm not sure if I'll be back next year to give it another go without doing a 23-kilometer long run beforehand of course, but we'll have to see. Anyways, the total mileage for the week was about 120 kilometers, a solid week as usual. However, Sunday's long run and race might have been a bit reckless, as we'll find out in the next video that I ended up getting a minor injury in the following week. Anyways, while we're on the topic of races, let me quickly go through my racing history so far. I won't go into too much detail of each race, but I'll try to provide a quick summary I guess. Okay, from about February 2020, which is when I started running, all the way to September 2022, I did not do any races at all. I did sign up for the 2021 Sydney Marathon, but it was postponed to 2022 due to COVID, so I just did a time trial on the day on my local netball court instead. And then came 2022 when I did my first actual race, which was the 2022 Sydney Marathon. By this point, I've done about 2 solid time trial marathons, but I didn't really know how to race it that well. So going into the race, I already had like a 1:27 half marathon PB, but no real concept of how to actually pace myself on like a hilly course that is Sydney, because I did a half marathon time trial on like super flat netball course after all. So I ended up experiencing cramps for the first time ever in running. Both my quads were cramped at around 30 k's, and it was pretty miserable for the rest of the race, but yeah, I still really enjoyed it. First official race, especially after lockdowns, and it was a Sydney Marathon as well, so that's amazing I guess. And then my next race after that was the 2023 Sydney 10. This is pretty much the 10k road state championships of New South Wales, so it's a pretty fast course. I remember Jean, who I met in Parkrun, told me to sign up and give it a try because it's very likely that I'll probably smash a 10k PB there, which is fair because I've actually never really raced a 10k at this point. So that was my first 10k race ever, and it was a really fast race as well. I think I ran about 36:58, which I was really surprised about. And then the next race was the Sydney Striders 10k series at Homebush, and this was a tune-up race that was part of my marathon training for the 2023 Sydney Marathon, and I also ran another 10k PB here in about I think 36:23 or something. It was also my first time running a club organised race, and I say it's fairly well organised too. And then the next race I did was the 2023 City to Surf, so this was going to be my first time ever doing like City to Surf as well, being one of the largest fun runs in Sydney and Australia and pretty much the whole world I guess, with 8,000 people, you know. It was definitely gonna be exciting as well. I was pretty surprised to see how hilly it was. It was also the first time I ran really fast downhill, so that was pretty amazing. That wasn't a planned tune-up race as part of training for a Sydney Marathon. It was just one of the biggest events of the year, and I figured why not give it a try I guess. And then the next race after that was the Sydney Striders 10k series again, but this time it was at Parramatta. Ran fast, somehow managed to get PB and felt very comfortable doing it as well. As of November 2024, I still have not been that PB surprisingly. I think I ran like 35:20 or something. I'm keen to revisit again sometime, like out of tradition, and see if I can smash my PB there. But that was also the final tune-up race for my 2023 Sydney Marathon training, and that was definitely a massive confidence booster as well. And finally, the next and final race for 2023 was a 2023 Sydney Marathon. So this was supposed to be a pretty big goal of mine to try get under the 3 hour mark for the marathon, which I didn't quite get. I was about a minute and a half off, but given the really hot conditions of the day and I had so much discomfort running with my shoes, I still think I did really well and had a great time anyway. And then came 2024 this year. So the first race I did in 2024 was SMC Road Series, race 5 for the 2023 to 2024 season. It was also my first time doing an SMC race, and this is also like a nice club organised local event around the Smithfield area. This was a race I did with Gib, mostly a training effort for him. I think it was in preparation for the Newcastle Marathon. That was the hottest day of the year that we ran the race in, but surprisingly we both paced ourselves really well and kept it under control. The next race that I did was in February, and that was the 2024 Sun Run. I think it was Morgan and Jake who told me to give it a try. Never really done a race in the North Beaches, and you know, figured why not. It's kind of like a mini city surf in the North Beaches area. It starts in DY and goes all the way to like Manly Beach. Maybe not a fast PB course by any means. It was definitely an enjoyable race. I also carried my GoPro there that day, made a little video about it. The next race I did was the mixed 5,000 community race, Heat 2 at the 2024 New South Wales 5,000 meter championships, courtesy to Chris who invited me to give it a try. I guess the tricky thing about this track race is that it can be held in the middle of the day or like the early afternoon, and in February it was really hot and humid and sunny, so I kind of underperformed there and did not get a PB, but yeah, I still had a great time. And then the next race I did was the 2024 Sydney 10. So this is the second time I would have done it, but this time it was actually part of a long run. I think I did like a 27k long run first to get there, and then ran the actual 10k race itself. So I did not get a 10k PB, but I think I matched my time from last year, 2023, about 36.58 as well, after like 27k's in the leg already. And then the next race after that was the Kuringgai Chase Fun Run. Definitely not a race that I would have done on my own accord. Sometimes those races are a bit out of reach or like not too local, but if you know someone there and they kind of invite you to give it a try, why not, right? The Kuringgai race was also the last race that I did before doing the actual Gold Coast Marathon itself. I didn't get to do that many speed up races as part of the training. I mostly just did like Parkrun instead, like 5k's. So it's kind of a shame I didn't get smashed for some more 10k's like I did last year. And I know it's been November now, but let's keep going, I guess. After Gold Coast, the next race I did was the 2024 Sydney Harbour 10k, which I think was held about 4 weeks after the Gold Coast Marathon. So I wasn't feeling too fit here, but yeah, it was also my first time doing the Sydney Harbour 10k, and I heard that's a pretty fast course, probably almost as fast as the Sydney 10. And I've never really done like a short distance race around the city, so it's kind of cool as well. I think it was a very windy day, and I wasn't feeling too fit, so gave my best shot, but didn't really walk away with a PB, but still ran fairly well, I think. And then the next race after that was the City Surf 2024. I was initially keen to give it a really hard try and see if I can like smash my PB there, but you know, ended up carrying my GoPro instead, just recording a whole vlog there. So yeah, really enjoyable time. Somehow still ran a course PB there. The next race after that was the 2024 Sydney Half. So this is pretty much the half marathon state championships of New South Wales. So this is going to be one of the fastest courses around here. It was also my first time doing this half race as well in Sydney Park. This time it was mostly a controlled pacing effort. I was mostly just running alongside Chris, just try to get around 120. I think the course was mostly fast as I heard and was expecting, but I think it was very humid that day, and I also rolled my ankle doing the warm-up of the race, so I wasn't able to run for like a week after that. The next race after that was the Sydney Striders 10k series at Parramatta. So this time I came back and was going to race it with Gib. I think the conditions weren't great that day, and it wasn't feeling that great in the morning, so yeah, we mostly just ran together, very casual, still enjoyed it, but yeah, no PB this time, I guess. And that was going to be the final race before I ran the 2024 Sydney Marathon. So this was a marathon I planned to do this year, 10 weeks right after Gold Coast, but I wasn't sure how I was going to approach it. I ended up just deciding to pace a few mates there, try to get under the 3 hour mark, probably like around 2:55 to 3 hour effort, I guess. And we ended up running around 2:58, I think, which is great. I think the conditions were so good this year. The race started really early at around 6 AM, and it was barely 6 degrees Celsius, and probably peaked at like 15 to 20 degrees by the end of the race, so very ideal racing conditions. And the other thing is the course was improved compared to last year. Less hairpin turns, an extension at Randwick, and then like less time at Centennial Park. I'm kind of keen to come back next year and probably make it my main A-Goal marathon race, and that was in mid-September. But the racing didn't end there, because shortly after I did the SMC Road Race Series again, the half marathon, mostly with Gib. Every time we do that race there, it's always so hot and sunny, but you know, it is what it is. We always keep control and pace really well. And then the next race after that was the 2024 BBBRun, the 10k event. This was a race I was planning to do last year, if not for my little calf injury that I got in October last year. Just like a half marathon, 10k, wheelchair, frame running, 2k fun run. It's one of the only local races I've seen that has actually accommodated wheelchair and frame running, so yeah, big respect to that. Ran it fairly well, didn't quite get PB, but definitely a race that I really enjoyed. I might do it next year as well. And then the next race I did after that was the King's Cross Track Club 5000 time trial, courtesy of Chris. Thanks for inviting me, I guess. Unfortunately, it was raining a lot that day, and it was very packed. I wasn't able to run quite a PB there. I think I ran like 17:44 or something. I still had a great time. It was a fun event and something that I'll probably do again later on. And late that weekend, the same week, I did the Mixed 3000 Community A race at the 2024 New South Wales 3000 meter championships. So again, this was a race that Chris invited me to give it a try. It was also my first time doing a 3000 meter track race, so didn't really know how to pace myself. Went not too hard, faded really badly, and like finished in like around 10 minutes, which is still great, I think, but I definitely could have paced myself a little bit better. And then finally, the last race I did for this year was the Race Hub Parramatta 10k. The race starts at 9 AM, and I think the temperatures were going to peak at like 30 degrees that day, so yeah, it's going to be a really hot race. None of us were too keen, but I think Chris and I, we tried to be sensible for it. First 5k in around 17:30 or so, then the last 5k just try to send it and see how it goes. And for the most part, our first 5k went pretty well, and I think for the last 5k, Chris just kind of faded, and I tried to hold on. Somehow I ended up running pretty well there, like I think 35:48, not PB, but somehow I managed to get the win, and Chris came second. So from having done only one race in 2022 to like 5 races in 2023, and then like 16 races in 2024, it certainly feels like I raced a whole lot this year. But I wouldn't say that all of them were actually like full race efforts, because I think if I was to race every race at a super hard effort, I'd probably get quite exhausted or just like burnt out, both physically and mentally over time. So the way I see it, I think races are a great way to celebrate training efforts, sort of like the destination of a goal. You choose a race, get the training and the work done, and then give it your best shot on race day. The atmosphere and environment of a race is certainly different to that of a solid time trial. There might be crowds and cheering for like support, and that kind of fuels your spirit and adrenaline. The courses are going to be planned, and there's going to be like road closures for mostly uninterrupted efforts, and many things to look forward to afterwards as well. Sometimes it's even better when you sign up with your mates and race with them, and even be surprised to find familiar faces amongst the crowds along the way or after the race as well. I feel like sometimes you don't have to sign up to a race to give it your top effort each time either. Races can also be a way to like pace a mate, to meet new people, to find out about and like join running clubs, to even like support or represent a running club or like organization, charity or movement, and maybe even to just simply run along a course, kind of like for exploration purposes, I guess. So there's many reasons that people race, and for me personally, the races I've done in the past would have been either tune-up races, which is supposed to be all-out effort to mostly build confidence and see where fitness is at through marathon training. And for me, it was often 10k races like the Sydney Strider 10k series, and sometimes parkruns as well for the 5k efforts. Some of the races could be pacing efforts, or like join some mates for a bit of company and fun, like usually through invites and recommendations, such as like track races for example, or local ones like the BBBRun. Some of the races are also part of long runs, more like races within like training runs to add extra distance and mileage and some spice as well, I guess. And it's often like a 10k race after like a long run commute to get there, but certainly not like a tune-up race effort. And there's also some races that I do out of familiarity and like tradition, I guess. It's like City Surf for example, which isn't the usual race distance of like 10k but rather 14 kilometers instead. However, it doesn't really matter because it's just simply iconic, and it's nice to take part in such like a massive fun run, especially as a runner based in Sydney. You might have noticed that I haven't really signed to any 5k road races so far. I guess the simple reason for that is that we have Parkrun. Although Parkrun might not really be considered a race, some of them can still be fairly quick, like Rose Parkrun for example, whether it's like the course or the participants, I guess. So I don't mind giving a solid effort there sometimes, as I've run many PBs there, and often quicker than what I could probably do in a solo time trial alone. But who knows, I might do like a 5k road race in the future sometime. The other thing I want to mention that when it comes to races is the costs and expenses involved, as they definitely add up, and not just in entry fees but also the time involved for like planning, scheduling and commute as well, and in some cases that includes like leave, travel and accommodation. I think Gold Coast Marathon is the only race I've done so far that wasn't quite local, where I had to book a flight and plan accommodation as well, but everything else has been within like public transport or like driving distance, I guess. Personally, I'm not too keen on traveling too far for races, and I'm kind of happy to just keep things local whenever I can. And I also often treat it as like a small expense in the grand scheme of things, since for me it's mostly about the experience and the memories, and sometimes to also support us like local club organized races for example. And plus some races feature like various charity or fundraising efforts, so I can definitely get behind that a bit. So what's in store for me in the future? So firstly, there's really no pressure for me internally to like redo previous races, but I suspect I'll still end up signing for like a few usual price races or iconic ones such as like the Sydney 10 and also City Surf. However, some new races would be certainly nice too, as there's plenty that I haven't done yet or was cruised about this year but wasn't able to fit it in, especially the local and club organized ones such as like the Sydney Striders 10k series. I've already done Homebush and Parramatta. I might as well check out the other two that they have available sometime, which is Lane Cove National Park and North Head. There's also Race Hub. I've already recently done the Parramatta course, so I might be keen to check out the other two races that they have next year at Raging Water Sydney and also like Western Sydney Parklands. There's also the West East Joggers Fun Runs and the Festival of Defeat at Lake Gillawana. I've done many long runs in Lake Gillawana, so I feel fairly local there, so why not, I guess. There's also the Hocker Runaway Sydney Half Marathon. It seems to be the biggest half marathon race in Sydney, so I might give that a try too, and maybe some trail races as well, who knows. I'm sure there's gonna be more decent races to consider next year, but those are the ones I can think of at the top of my head at the moment. And then in terms of marathons, I'm not sure yet since I didn't really plan that far ahead, but I think the 2025 Sydney Marathon is likely at least. As I mentioned before, the 2024 course was a huge improvement over the previous years, paired with the nice weather conditions that we had this year by chance, just made it such an enjoyable experience this time round. Plus, given that the race date for 2025 has been pushed forward to the 31st of August, there might be a better chance of like decent racing weather conditions compared to the coin flip conditions that we tend to get in like mid-September. But given that Sydney Marathon has become the 7th world major marathon, getting entry for it might be a bit more tricky, and if that's the case, I might check out like Canberra or Melbourne Marathon for example, but not really sure yet. I'm also not sure if I'd revisit Gold Coast this year. It's definitely a fast and scenic course that I really enjoyed, but I usually have my eyes on like local events first. And on a final note, I do want to mention that races do need volunteers for the event to actually take place, whether that's with helping set up the course, being a marshal, a pacer or like photographer, providing support at drink stations and so on. I've never actually done any volunteering for any race so far, although I have done a bunch of volunteering for Parkrun for about 10 occasions now since I first started. And in a way, I guess it's kind of fun and fulfilling, and a nice change of pace from usually being the one that's always running instead. However, I think there's also no pressure to be a volunteer either. You can if you want, and on some occasions, you may get something back in return for your time, whether that's some merch or even like some discount or free entry for the next event, for example. And if you don't volunteer, then honestly, it's probably not a big deal by any means, but regardless, I think I'll still personally volunteer for races more often later on when I get the chance and see how it goes, I guess. If you enjoy running but have never raced before, I definitely recommend to give some races a try sometime, whether it's those local club organized races or like even those massive events. There'll be races where you do really well and absolutely smash a PB, some where you may not get the outcome or result you were hoping for or expecting, some where you're actually doing for others or for like a cause and so on. But remember that you don't have to race too often or feel the need to go all out each time or even like train super hard for them. Everyone's there for different reasons after all. For me, races are a great way to like create goals around, train towards and like celebrate at. It's always a unique and memorable experience each time, and it's always nice to see familiar faces out there as well. I also think races make the sport of running interesting and fun and helps to grow over time. If you have any recommendations for races around Sydney that I should check out sometime, feel free to let me know. But other than that, that's pretty much all to say for now, so thanks for watching and have a nice day. Bye!